Galatians, but it's just a study guide. There's no films or anything, just study guide material on Galatians. So that's probably where we'll be going next in a couple weeks. But I don't know how many were even here a couple years ago when we were doing Romans. No? Wes? No? Yeah, we probably, we started Romans. It took us like a year and a half, and
there for a long time.
Yeah, and then we went to John, I think, for some reason, and we didn't finish Romans. We got chapter 15 and 16 to go, so that's what I thought we'd finish up chapter 15 and 16, and then go into Galatians here when we get the material. But so, Romans is a very important book. It lays out everything. What the section we're in now is maybe a little tougher than some because it hits us where it kind of it hurts, and so we're going to tackle chapter 15 today. But you need to open in prayer here and let the Holy Spirit work today. So, Dwight, would you open us in a word of prayer this morning?
Lord, we're so privileged to be able to come unhindered and to have this material that you provided for us, the very Word of God, in a form that we can read and study, discuss, learn from. And I pray that today we might take away something that would further our service to you as we contemplate the Word this morning.
Okay. Amen. All right. So, just a review of Romans a little bit. What we can remember, even with our own study and different things. First of all, it's one of the books that nobody really contends who wrote it. And that, there's so many voices out there, but even the people that are kind of real critics of the Bible agree that Paul wrote this one, and it's kind of good to hear that, everybody's kind of in agreement, Paul wrote it. And so, what year do you think he wrote it? Now, we know that Jesus died around 33 AD. If you would just go to any of the, usually in the beginning of your Bible commentaries or whatever you have, kind of list what year they were written, the different books. What would you say Romans was written at about?
56 or 57.
There you go, that's right, 56, 57. And most of the New Testament books are from 50 to 65, 67. John, I think, was 95 in Revelation there. So, but it's right about in the middle. It's wrote right there in that 57, 8. Okay, so where was Paul when he wrote it? The funny thing was he had never been to Rome yet. He was in Corinth when he wrote this to the Romans, but as we're going to find out in chapter 16, he knew a lot of Romans, and so his view on Rome was through his friendships, I think. But it contains the most complete exposition of the New Testament central truths of Christianity. It's the one book that has all of it in it. He starts out with how do you get saved, your attitude towards sin, then he hits the Jews. Remember we talked, it's at chapter 9 through 11, the Jews and their flawed thinking on Christianity. They had kind of one foot in the temple, one foot in the church, and they weren't sure which way to go, and he was hitting them with that. And then we get to chapter 13, and then we talk about following the government, but if the government doesn't follow Christianity, then we need to be against the government. In so many words, we went through a study on that. And 13 and 14, we start talking about what do you do now that you're a Christian? How do you live this life? And the question of the day then, I'm going to ask several times is, how should those who have been justified by grace respond in their everyday lives? That's going to be the question I'm going to ask over and over, probably, as we go through these last two chapters. Knowing what we know now, knowing what Paul has taught us in all of these through Rome here, how are we to live then? I had another question there. Paul has this imaginary critic that he's always talking to in Romans when he goes through and he'll ask a question like it's to somebody, but it really is he's just trying to answer the questions of the critics of the day. And so he's asking questions to himself, but it's almost like he's asking it to somebody else, and then he lays out the answer. Well, in chapter 15, we're kind of beyond that stage of it, but it's still kind of almost in a question form. So chapter 15, verse 1, 2 and 3 is where we're going to kind of spend our time today. Then as this study goes on, it's going to go quicker. But these first three verses are kind of big. So we look at the 15:1. Now who are strong ought to bear the weakness of those without strength, and not just please ourselves. And so if we go back to verse 14:1, we see it's pretty close to the same thing in a little different words. Now accept the ones who is weak in faith. Now accept the one who is weak in faith, but not for the purpose of passing judgment on his opinions. Okay, they were talking about these disputable matters. And what were some of these disputable matters? Because he's really referring to the same thing here. Yeah. And this is where we've got to understand where we're at here. What are some of these disputable matters?
What they were eating was probably one of the
Yeah,
one thing.
one of the things was, and what was the deal? What were they eating?
Some of it was stuff that was sacrifices.
Yeah, the meat. Okay, so the meat that was sacrificed to idols, people are having a hard time saying, you can't eat that. And, God says, well, yeah, you can. Or Paul said, yeah, you can. And God said, you can. There's nothing wrong with that. It's a disputable matter because of a weaker relationship with Christ. But how are we to respond in that situation? If you have somebody over in this day and age, if you have somebody over that has a little bit of this weakness, you say that he doesn't want to eat certain food. Well, and you know that, what are you going to do? Not prepare that food. Yeah, yeah. This doctor I go to makes me. He wants me to get away from certain foods, and it's just been recently in my life that I really like seafood, and I like shrimp, and I like lobster and crab, and he kind of tells me, no, you can't have that. You really shouldn't eat that. Tuna. And so I'm asking, what's the problem here with all this good stuff, And he goes, well, they're all bottom feeders. They're all, and so the ocean is kind of a nasty place, and it'd be a whole lot nastier if we didn't have all these bottom feeders. But shrimp eat off the bottom, the lobster eat off the bottom, tuna they get mercury from the bottom. So you get mercury and you get lead and you get things that you're not supposed to have from these things. So that's a different case of not eating what you're, you know. But if we went back to Leviticus would say, don't eat shellfish, right? So, and that's not what he was pushing. You know, he was just saying, don't eat it because you shouldn't have it. And I think sometimes if we listen to what the Bible had, you know, even though we can eat it, it might not be the best thing for us. Bacon. Who can say no to bacon? But pigs, again, are one of those things that they'll eat anything, and they'll eat flesh if you give it to them. So another one of those things that you're supposed to stay away from for your own health, possibly. But again, I'm not going to tell you not to eat bacon or eat shrimp or anything, because clearly the Bible teaches you can. You can have whatever you want. So, again, this is not what he's saying when it's disputable matters. It's this was a spiritual matter. They couldn't eat it because they thought it was a sin to eat it. A sacrificed animal couldn't be eaten, and so there's a difference there, right?
You know, to give you a modern day example, my grandpa was a pastor. When he got his license plate for his trailer, it was whatever letters, and it said 666.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of people in the congregation go, you can't have a license plate that says 666. And he goes, it's a random number. You know what I'm saying? He goes, well, but in the Bible, it says nothing to do with that. You know what I mean? But I mean, people in his congregation were upset. He drove a trailer that had 666 on it. It was, to him, meant nothing. He goes, it's nothing. It's just a random number that kicked out of the computer for my license. You know, but I mean, it's the same kind of a thing where it did upset some people, but there was no credence
no
behind it.
biblical, right. Okay, so we are to bear the weakness of those in strength. Now, what do you think this means, bearing the weakness? Can you give me what this means? And if you have a study Bible, you know, you probably have some notes that are pretty good in it, and you can use those. There's nothing wrong with reading it right out of there, because you know, my wife's is a lot better than mine when it comes to comments on those. So if you have a good one, you know. So what does that mean?
My Bible, it's New International Version, it says, those who are strong ought to bear with the scruples of the weak.
Okay. Yeah, I've seen that one. Okay, so we just kind of talked about that. If your conscience, here's the thing about conscience, though, right? And scruples. And that's a good answer. I'm not saying that, but what is it about your conscience and your scruples if you follow?
You ignore them for a while, they go away.
Yeah. Okay, and why would you ignore them?
Gee, brother, it's trying to bother me right over here.
That is actually a good answer. I like that one. Why is that? Why would they go away?
Because of the hardening of your heart.
Okay, if you don't stay in the Word and your conscience doesn't match up with the Word, you can't listen to your conscience. Your conscience has to be fed through the right meaning of the Scripture. So if you get away from the Word, and then you can't listen to your conscience, it's going to be lost to the world's translation of what's right and wrong. Okay. But what does it mean to bear the burdens of one another? The weaknesses, I guess it is. And doesn't somebody say infirmities? Infirmities, does anybody's translation say bear the infirmities of one another? So infirmity would be a weakness or a failing. And really the meaning of it is compared to like a traveler. You're assisting a traveler, a companion, and by carrying his luggage for him or something like that, or helping him travel, carrying his burden. You're helping him do what he's supposed to do in life. You're trying to get him to where he wants to go, but you're helping him. You're not discouraging him. And like this would be like a new believer. We have wrong thoughts and ideas when we're new believers, but you just can't slam them every time. You have to work with them and kind of like understand where he's coming from, help him get things straight, help him to get where you want him to go by bearing his burden, by understanding. But okay, the flip side of this is what? Can we overdo that?
If you read in Colossians, he kind of presents the other side of that. But what's being talked about here is the strong going along and helping out the weak. In Colossians, it talks about those who consider themselves strong trying to impose regulations and a variety of behavioral things and celebration days and all that. And
Yeah.
Paul is the same author of both of them, but he talks very strongly in Colossians about not having those things imposed on you.
Yeah, good point. That okay, I think we will get there too a little bit. You should remind me if I don't. Okay, I got this off of, let's see, who was it again? Chuck Colson. Chuck Colson had a message on the radio one day that caught my ear, and so I looked it up. And it's about church discipline. We can love people, and that's the attitude of this day, isn't it? You love them, you just take care of them. You love them to death, and sooner or later they'll come around. But we can overdo that, I think, is the message. And it talks about this church that Todd Wagner is pastor of at Watermark Community Church in Dallas, Texas. And they recently removed a man caught in sexual sin from its membership rolls. And Watermark Church is one of these big mega churches, And the guy posted on, the media website, Facebook, that he had gotten kicked out because he was gay. Well, the media picked up on that right away and started accusing this church of, all kinds of different things, and said that this church didn't deserve to have this man in their congregation. But the reason, they just didn't kick him out, says, oh yeah, I heard you're gay, you're out. He went on to say that they worked with him for over a year on trying to bear his burdens. What can we do to help you? How can we help you understand this is wrong or whatever, and get you back and realize this is not right. Your lifestyle is not right. Well, the guy rejected it. He says no. He says I don't believe this is a sin, and I'm going to continue living this way. And see, this is where we get in trouble, right? Our conscience gets seared, and we're listening to the wrong voices. And so church discipline, that is such a hard thing. I have to compliment this Watergate Church, or Watermark Church, on doing the right thing. They said he could no longer be a member. Now that doesn't mean he couldn't come to church. He just couldn't be a member, right? But they made it clear that he was a friend, and that they needed to work with him. They tried everything they could, but he wouldn't listen. So what do you do? you keep carrying his burden. You keep trying to draw him in. To a certain degree, yeah. But there's a price to pay if you totally refuse to listen. And so there's a line we cross if we aren't careful, that we do have to stand up for the Bible. We cannot let things go and be pleasers of men, and that's the next couple verses here. Let us, verse 2, let's each of us please his neighbor for his good, to his edification. And that's really what this is talking about, right? We helping our neighbor, but we can't help him to go the wrong direction. It's got to be for his edification, for his building up, for his becoming more Christ-like. Okay. So this pastor said, we all struggle with something, but we have to keep working towards the goal of being more Christ-like, and not for the good of the church, by extension, the good of the world. And that's what's happened in our world, hasn't it? We have allowed all these different kinds of lifestyle things, and all of a sudden now we find ourselves up to our necks in trouble because we haven't stood up for the right things.
Don't you think most churches, because of the political correctness, don't you think most churches nowadays would just say, well, we've done all we can do. That's just something God's going to have to sort out.
Yeah, I think you're right when you say most churches. Yeah, but once again, now we've gotten this hope from this president-elect that things might change a little, but we still have to remember that he's not the Savior, is he? And he's going to be. You can count that the world is going to come against him now. I mean, he's going to find himself in more trouble than he's ever found himself in. So, even though he's not a perfect man like we all know, or none of us are, he's going to need a tremendous amount of prayer. On that note, let's go to Jonah for just a minute. Jonah chapter 3. Got to find it myself. It's Zechariah, Malachi, Micah. It's right before Micah, right? Jonah chapter 3. Yeah. The funny thing is how it seems like this fits into our day and age. The story. Jonah got sent to Nineveh. He didn't want to go there because they were all bad, and they really were enemies of Israel. But God said, "You're going to go." But what did it take to turn that country around? Let's read it here. Verse 5. Wait a minute now. Verse 4. Then when Jonah began to go through the city, one day's walk, he cried out and said, "Yet 40 days and Nineveh will be overthrown." So it's a pretty good-sized city. It took them all day to get around this city. And the people of Nineveh believed in God, and they called a fast and put on sackcloth from the greatest to the least of them. So here we find out that pretty much all of them put on sackcloth. And the word reached the king of Nineveh, and he arose from his throne, laid aside his robe from him, covered himself with sackcloth, and sat on the ashes. And he issued a proclamation, and it said, "In Nineveh, by the decree of the king and his nobles, do not let man, beast, herd, or flock taste a thing. Do not let them eat or drink water. But both man and beast must be covered with sackcloth, and let men call on God earnestly, that each must turn from his wicked way and from the violence which is in his hand." Who knows? God may turn and relent and withdraw his burning anger, so that we shall not perish. What did it take for Nineveh to be saved? It took the whole nation repenting. You know, in our case, I think it's the same thing. If for America to survive, we can't count on one man. It's going to take, for sure, the Christians of this nation, just like it says in 2 Chronicles 7:14, to those of us who are called by His name, if we would repent.
You know, it may sound kind of bad, but I don't see our nation ever going back that far anymore.
That's a problem. Yeah,
I mean, when you look at the way we're running right now and stuff, you know, I got in a real row with one guy here before the election was, you know, who was going to win, you know, and we're so worried. And I said, you know, I have my pick. I said, but you know, I said, no matter who wins or loses, I said, on November the 9th of November, I said, God's still in control. You know, and until this nation comes back, that goes back to God, I don't care who you put in that White House or who you put any place, it's not going to change.
No, maybe not completely, but but it does matter who is the boss, right? I mean, it says.
It definitely. I mean, I agree. We got to put. But I mean, as a nation, as the United States, personally, and it's a bad thought, but I don't see us going back anymore.
I don't either. But you know, how do you pray then? You know, that'd be the question again of the day. You know, what should we do? Knowing this, what should we do? Our only choice is to pray. You know.
You look at our younger generation coming up and stuff, and God is on the back burner with most of them.
Yeah.
You look at our protesters and stuff right now, they're all protesting. They don't even know what they're protesting about. And yet they're the ones that are going to be taking care of this nation in another 10 years or so. They're our future. They're our generation.
Yeah. Although, I've been to two churches in Fargo and one in Minneapolis now that have been very encouraged by these young people who are doing things right. In fact, I think they're doing it better than we did. They are accountable to each other, and they are seeking God. And you know, a group of young people that are 24, 23 years old go up for a meal, and they led it in prayer. You don't see that too often. And the conversation was all godly. I thought that was very good. I hope there's more like that. I'm pretty sure there is. But I don't think all is lost yet. Although I have the same feeling. I mean, we have to have a major turn in this country.
But I think you have to be encouraged by the fact that, like, you know, look at NDSU, the number of the kids that they have in crew is higher than it's ever been, ever, in the history of the college and stuff. So, I mean, it's discouraging, but I think there are parts that are encouraging. I mean, I think some of the kids are starting to realize they got to have something. And maybe a lot of them are saying, it's God. You know, so, I mean, you see the protests, because that's the media wants to see. They're not going to show you, you know, at the end of the football game, 40 guys praying.
Oh, no,
They're not going to show you that part. I mean,
no.
if they do, they collapse at it, then they cut away. But it's happening. There is some revival going on. It's just the media won't allow you to see that because of the
Right, but this is the part that our media and stuff nowadays, they won't let you, you know, like you just said, they won't show this sort of stuff.
But I mean, I think there is some encouragement out there. I really do.
Well, I hope so.
I really do.
The problem
Do you
is,
think every person in Nineveh repented? I would say no. You know, but the king made a decree and things like that, and it showed that the ruling party of it was, you know, seeing where they had made mistakes and things. But I'm absolutely positive not every person in Nineveh.
Well, if you go back to it, Jonah wasn't even very happy about him repenting. You know, I mean, he was the prophet they said.
but their revival lasted like 300 years, wasn't it? Before Nineveh actually got wiped off the earth. It lasted a long time. So quite a few had to have, but yeah, I would say 100%. That's a pretty hard number to, I don't know. It doesn't really, it just, huh?
That's probably irrelevant. I mean,
Yeah.
they had a significant turnaround.
Yeah, significant turn. And that's what I'm thinking too, if we could get a significant turnaround in this country, but it's going to take
I-
prayer.
No, I think they all did. If you believe the Bible, because it
It
says,
said they all
and
repented.
all of them, from greatest to least, put on sackcloth. Maybe in their mind they didn't, commit, but in action they did. I mean, if you believe the Bible, it says all of them put on sackcloth. Now, you can't judge the condition of their heart, but all of them at least went through the motion,
They did it though.
because it says all of them. So, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. But each of us please his neighbor for good, for his edification. The society, if we drift away from the truth, the more it will hate the people who speak the truth, right? And we see that all the time. We even in this church in Texas, they're taking a beating now for standing the way they stood. But 20 years ago, that would have been a whole different story. It would have been the right thing to do, but now it's the wrong thing because of society's thoughts. So, all I'm saying on this is that there's a balance here in this carrying the burdens of one another. You have to keep in mind the direction you're going, the edification towards more Christ-likeness, not just make that person happy and agree with everything he says or whatever. It's to build them towards Christ. So that is the direction we have to keep in mind. But if there's no spirit of love, that's the balance part. Then what happens? If there's no love, if we don't have that love and we're just judgmental, and that we're really not helping that person, are we? We're really not thinking straight. And actually, then we get this thing about what Dwight talked to rule over them, and to a tendency as believers to judge in the wrong way, and not help them at all. Okay, so there's the other story I got today, and it comes from another guy on the radio, Ron Hutchcraft. He had this deal about I have a few notes here. I got to find them here. The bulk of the world now looks at evangelical leaders and pastors, high-level pastors, as being professional God salesmen. They have become something less than spiritual leaders. Now they're just wanting your money and leading you in the wrong direction. And so how does that turn around? He points to the story about the woman at the well, and for his opinion here, and he goes that Jesus, one-on-one with this woman, changed her heart, and then that lady told the whole town about Christ. And but his point was that we've been working on the reservations for 400 years and really have gotten hardly any success. Excuse me. And so, but now finally, there's been some young Native Americans that have accepted Christ, understand the deep truths, have really learned the great lessons of Christianity, are going back to the reservation, and now we're having one of the greatest revivals we've seen in the history of the United States on the reservation. The most believers, according to Ron Hutchcraft, that we're new believers right now are Indians. It's kind of hard to, when we're going through this, what we're going through in our state, you wouldn't think so, but we're a pretty small portion of it. And so then he had this guy on the program who was talking about it, and he said, we force this Savior onto him and his side of the story, but when you talk about him being the creator, then they understand, and it's just their point of view. He says, we're from the day we were born, we're spiritualized. We're got all these spirits in the Indian culture, and a lot of them have to do with the Creator. But when they hear that Jesus is the Creator, a light goes off in their mind, and so he says that has been the biggest turnaround when they finally understand that Jesus is the Creator, and. According to him, there is a big turnaround. Now they were carrying the burden. Now he's carrying that burden of his neighbor here, and he's on the res, doing this work, getting him pointed towards Christ. Even though they have a lot to work through, it looks like it's finally starting to have fruit here. Okay. Verse 3, for even Christ did not please himself, but as it is written, the reproaches of those who reproached thee fell upon me. And then I'm going to read 4:2. For whatever was written in earlier times was written for our instruction, that through perseverance and the encouragement of the Scriptures we might have hope. What is this verse talking about? What does reproach really mean here? What is that word? Insults. Yeah. Slander. Any other words? Falsely accused. So if we put some of those words in here, the falsely accused of those who slandered fell upon me. Where did he get this from? We're going to go there. Psalm 69. Let's go there. And then we're going to go to Psalm 32, I think it is. Psalm 69. And verse 9, yeah. Some of you want to read 8 and 9 at least there?
I'm a stranger to my brothers, an alien to my mother's son. The zeal for your house consumes me, and the insults of those who insult you fall on me. Okay.
So who's he talking about here, the estranged from my brothers? Now who's writing this psalm? David. But really, is it about David? It's about Jesus, yeah. It's about Christ. And so we have, who is the brothers here? Yeah, it'd be his Jewish, who he came to save. I came to my own received me not. So his own people were alienated him, even his mother's sons, which he's talking about. One of them would be James. Okay. So his zeal for his house has consumed him, and the reproaches of those who reproach thee have fallen on me. The insults that he took were really directed at who? Here's the key, I think, to this, and in our day. Where were those insults really directed? If they hated Jesus, who did they really hate?
God.
They hated God. Yeah. And where can we find that? If we wanted to look that up.
They're as scary as that.
Yeah, if we go to John, and we're going to go to John in a bit. Well, don't let me forget that. But yeah, they hate God. If they hated Jesus, then really they hated God, because I'm just telling you, I'm just revealing God to you. This is who God is. If you don't like me, then it's the Father who you really don't like. All right. But we're going to go to 32, Psalms 32 for a second. And it says, didn't we read here? Okay. Yeah. I must have missed something here, but this verse is about how, I guess the question of the day is, how should we then react? What do we do? How do we respond? The justified respond when the insults are against us. When, we know that if they hate us because we're doing what's right, then really they're hating the God we serve. Okay, we work our way back there. And so Psalm 32, verse 6. Therefore let everyone who is godly pray to thee in a time when thou mightst be found. Surely in a flood of great waters they shall not reach him. Thou art my hiding place. Thou dost preserve me from trouble. Thou dost surround me with songs of deliverance. So, what is the right time to pray? True. You got me there. Well, but if you let me put that different then. If you know you sinned, when's the right time to take care of it?
As soon as possible.
Okay, yeah. And I think in the time, and when you find out that you have done something of some sin, committed a sin, get it straight. And when you realize what you've done, it's time to get it straight. It's the time to pray. Okay. So I can't remember exactly if that didn't fit as well as I thought here and where I was at here, but okay. So let's say that he went to the Old Testament, Paul did here, to prove his point. What can we gather from that to prove his point about how Jesus was treated? He went to Psalms to reinforce that. He went to the Old Testament. We've talked about this a lot. It was prophesied, right?
Prophecy is fulfillment of prophecy.
And fulfillment of prophecy. Okay, so, but I want to just stretch us a little bit. How should we look at this from more of from like a man's perspective, I guess. If we can say, yeah, well, it's prophesied, it's going to happen. But we all have bosses, and the boss tells us to go do this. Do we do it exactly the way the boss tells us all the time?
Of course, how you like your job.
Yeah. Yeah, and sometimes you might not like your boss too well and do just the opposite, right? Okay, but uh-huh.
The other day, we get a lot of situations, but they end up over trucking. They're afraid they're going to run out, so then they order way too much. But I mean, you get out to wherever you're going, you sit and wait and wait. I mean, like 18, 20, 30 hours, and you're not getting paid for that. And of course, you get frustrated, and everybody's starting to get a little psycho. On the CD radio, it gets a little crazy. But one of the friends I have, he's just a real quiet guy. But I never assumed he was the spiritual guy. And he said, guys were just getting really crazy. And he said, somebody goes, what are we going to do? This is wrong. And all Jim said was, what would Jesus do? And boy, the radio got quiet like, it was, it was like, wow, really. I mean, and I think almost the last 5 months of my life, I mean, stuff comes up all the time, work, whatever, and I always ask myself that. I don't always do the right thing, but, I mean, that's,
Yeah.
it just comes from what you would least expect sometimes, and it's amazing how that works.
Yeah.
In part, do you think he's working on, like even, like Jesus would do something, and the people would say, well, you're as great as our father Abraham, or David. By going back, sometimes we forget about the bad that people do in history. We look at them as these great figures. And by going back, is he just reinforcing what the people are thinking? That, hey, if Abraham, if David, if these people said this, how can you not buy it? Because you've already said how great they are. So it's just trying to appease people's conscience of that day, what they already believed in.
Yeah. That's a good thought too. I was thinking I got to wrap this up, but we take for granted that it's prophecy. It was fulfilled. It's past tense now for us. We see that, but really, Jesus had to do that. God gave him the order. He still had to go through with it and do it exactly like the Father asked. And he did, and we know he did. But yet, I often think we don't give Jesus enough credit here that, he followed it to the letter. What was told him to do, he did it exactly like it was supposed to be. And what if he wouldn't? What if it wouldn't have been easy to say yes to some of these worldly things, and do something that people wanted instead of what it said here. He took the reproaches, he took the insults because he wasn't going to do what the people wanted him to do.
At the same time, it would have proven the Bible wrong.
Yeah, I mean...
See, and the whole thing with the prophecy is everything from the beginning to the end, the 300 and some prophecies that were made have all come fulfillment to the T, to the letter.
Yeah.
And so when these people come up and say, well, Revelations and stuff, it can't happen. Mm-hmm. It will happen.
No, it will happen.
Because anything otherwise, somebody would have had it been wrong. And they aren't. Every one of the prophecies that have been fulfilled, and the ones that are still coming will be fulfilled.
Yeah, and that's a good message. Yeah. Okay. So as we just come to that end, we know that Jesus did. He took all this reproach for us to make sure things went as planned, and that's where we're at. We need to stand firm and take the insults, take the reproach from the world to stand firm for him, because it ain't going to pay off now, but it will pay off. It will pay off. Okay. Thanks for coming this morning.